Every gardener has a horror story about clay soil, the kind that turns to concrete in August and soup in April. But here's the truth almost nobody tells you. That sticky, stubborn clay in your yard is one of the richest, most nutrient-dense growing mediums on Earth. The problem was never the clay itself. The problem is that we've spent decades fighting it instead of learning how it actually works. I'm bringing you the real soil science today, no wasted bags of sand, no gimmicks, just the strategies that genuinely transform clay into some of the most productive ground you'll ever plant in. If this kind of straight-talking gardening knowledge is useful to you, this is exactly what Gardening Like a Pro is here for, so stick with me to the end. To understand clay, you first need to understand soil texture, which comes down to particle size. Sand particles are large enough to see and feel gritty between your fingers. Silt sits in the middle. Clay particles are so microscopically fine, smaller than 0.002 of a millimeter, that you'd need an electron microscope to make out a single one. That tiny size is exactly what makes clay so powerful. Because the particles are so small, they carry an enormous amount of surface area relative to their volume. A single gram of clay can have several hundred square meters of surface area packed into it. Every one of those surfaces carries a negative electrical charge, which means clay actively attracts and holds on to positively charged nutrients like calcium, magnesium, potassium, and iron. Soil scientists call this cation exchange capacity, and clay soils rank among the highest of any soil type for it. In plain terms, your clay soil is a nutrient bank, quietly storing fertility that sandier soils simply cannot hold on to. Clay also holds water exceptionally well. During a dry spell, that water reserve can be the difference between a garden that limps along and one that thrives. Clay soils resist erosion better than sandy ones too, which makes them ideal for slopes, raised beds, and anywhere structure matters. And the small pore spaces within clay aggregates create ideal shelter for the beneficial bacteria and fungi that keep a garden's underground ecosystem humming. None of this means clay is flawless. When it's degraded or mismanaged, it compacts easily, drains poorly, and swings between sticky and brick-hard depending on moisture. Those problems are real, but they're fixable, and the fixes are simpler than most people think. Before we get to what works, let's clear up what doesn't, because some of the most repeated gardening advice out there actually makes clay worse. The first myth is adding sand to loosen things up. Please don't. Mixing a small amount of sand into clay doesn't create a lighter blend, it creates something closer to concrete. This is literally the process used to make bricks. A low ratio of sand to clay packs sand grains into the clay matrix and locks everything together, making drainage worse instead of better. Shifting the texture meaningfully would require enormous volumes of sand, and even then you'd still need to fix the underlying biology, so it's rarely worth the effort or the expense. The second myth is tilling your way to submission. Tilling breaks up clumps in the short term, which is exactly why it feels satisfying, but underneath the surface it destroys the fungal networks that hold soil aggregates together. In clay specifically, repeated tilling often creates a hard pan, a compacted layer just below the tilled depth that water cannot penetrate. You end up building a bathtub under your garden bed, trading a quick fix for a long-term drainage disaster. Now for the strategies that actually work, all backed by real soil science. The single most effective thing you can do is add organic matter consistently. Compost, worm castings, aged manure, and leaf mold all feed the microbial life in your soil, and fungi in particular produce sticky compounds called glomalin, first identified by USDA researcher Sarah Wright in the 1990s. Glomalin acts as a natural glue, binding clay particles into stable aggregates. Those aggregates create larger pore spaces that let water and air move freely, which is the definition of good soil structure. Apply 2 to 4 inches of compost to the surface and let the biology do the work over time. If you're building a brand new bed, you can incorporate it gently once, but avoid making tillage a regular habit. Worm castings are worth adding too, since their microbial density accelerates aggregate formation even faster. Second, know when to leave your soil alone, and this one costs nothing. Never work clay soil while it's waterlogged. Clay particles are flat and plate-shaped, and when soil is saturated those particles essentially float apart with no friction between them. The moment you step on it or run a tool through it, the particles press together and align flat, and that compaction is extremely hard to reverse. Test it with a simple squeeze. Grab a handful and press it in your fist. If it holds a ribbon shape or stays in a tight ball, it's too wet to work. If it crumbles apart naturally, you're good to go. After heavy rain, give it at least a day or two before walking your beds. Permanent raised beds with defined paths solve this problem for good, since the walking areas stay separate from the growing soil. Third, put cover crops to work as biological tillage. Deep-rooted plants like daikon radish and sunflower drive strong taproots straight through compacted clay layers. When the plant dies back, those roots decompose and leave behind channels that water, air, and future roots can follow. You're letting the plant do the digging so you don't have to. Fourth, keep your soil mulched. Bare clay dries into a hard crust that shrugs off water instead of absorbing it. A 2 to 3 inch layer of wood chips, straw, or leaf litter protects the surface from crusting, keeps moisture and microbial activity steady, moderates temperature swings, and slowly adds organic matter as it breaks down. Just pull it back slightly from plant stems and be generous everywhere else. None of this happens overnight. If you're starting with compacted, low organic matter clay, expect 2 to 4 years of consistent effort before you see dramatic change, though you'll notice small wins every season along the way, better drainage after rain in year 1, earthworms returning by year 2. That's simply how soil regeneration works. And once that structure is built, you'll have a soil type that holds nutrients better than almost anything else and shrugs off drought with ease. So let's bring it together. Add organic matter regularly, never work waterlogged soil, mulch the surface, plant deep-rooted cover crops, and keep foot traffic off your beds. That's the entire science-backed playbook. If you found this helpful, I genuinely appreciate it if you'd subscribe to Gardening Like a Pro so you don't miss what's coming next, and share it with a fellow gardener who's been fighting their clay for years. Drop your specific soil struggles in the comments, whether it's hard pan, waterlogged beds, or heavy compaction, because your questions shape exactly what we cover next.